So one of the craziest things that's ever been said in this world was Mansa Musa white, which the answer is pretty obvious. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to look at someone who reacted to this rather than looking at the original to see if we can learn something.
Greetings, I am the Lion Clan Chief. Welcome again to the Lion Clan. And yes, as you can see from the thumbnail, we are indeed dealing with Robert Sepper yet again, the last real known anthropologist on this planet, according to him.
So, to explain it very easily, Robert Sapir is one of these people who claims to be the last great anthropologist or whatever, the only one left. But when we actually look at his channel, all he's doing is repeating stuff that was said by people a long time ago and then twisting new information by people who would 100% disagree with him. And then he goes and claims that white people basically started every significant civilization in the world, which is where this Mansa Musa question is coming from.
I call him Lord Snowtep. Now, Lord Snowtep has made a claim that Mansa Musa is a white man. A claim which, by the way, I debunked a few months ago and he never responded. I challenged him and his fans. None of them have been able to debunk what I said, yeah?
Well, don't worry about that because the reason he doesn't want to respond to anybody, and he almost never does, is because the truth fears no question, and he fears every question of his ideas, which is why he hides behind just putting out his videos, keeping his fans, blocking anyone who disagrees. You're lucky if he hasn't even blocked you yet. You should probably check.
I debunked him already. But he's doubled down because he's found a genetic study through Grok, by the way, that shows the Manden people have a level of Eurasian ancestry. So he's saying that means Mansa Musa was a Caucasian.
So this is one of the problems with DNA evidence is that DNA really has gotten this place in our time as like the king of information, but a lot of people like to attach things to it and then they go see the DNA proves this, the DNA proves that, the DNA does this, and they do not even consider for 1 second that that DNA evidence, which if you look it up is circumstantial evidence, is not going to help unless there's a greater picture that is painted around it. But you know, they paint an immediate picture. Find any DNA, and I've said it again. If you found one piece of Black African DNA in Canada, a lot of people would go wild over that one piece because, of course, that's what DNA does today. And if you found one piece of, you know, a Japanese person in South Africa from whatever, choose a date, people are going to go crazy over that as well because DNA now, a lot of people are treating it like the God particle or something.
A blonde haired, blue eyed Caucasian or a red haired, blue eyed Caucasian. Now, in my last video, I got a bit too excited. Yeah, I kept on laughing and so on. So I'll try my best to hold my laughter because of this foolish shenanigans. But I'm going to debunk Sepper. So let's first have a look at what Sepper says in this video and then we'll destroy it. Okay?
Okay, I'm ready. Let's see this debunking of Robert Sapir, which again, we will watch another video of his debunking.
If modern Mandinka DNA shows an average of 15% ancient Eurasian admixture, this does not mean the ancient tribe 2 to 5,000 years ago was necessarily 15% Eurasian. The percentage of the ancient source population that was Eurasian at the time of admixture was likely much higher, possibly around 30% or more, which then became diluted over subsequent generations.
So I have to say something. A lot of the what he's saying right now is basically speculation, and he's basing it off of very little information. And so this is my problem with the DNA thing. A lot of people like to go in, they like to talk about it, they like to go crazy. And I mentioned again with the Mesopotamian thing, like a lot of these people were saying that the Mesopotamian guy came to Egypt and blah 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 blah. And so a lot of people go, well, therefore we found evidence of Mesopotamians in Egypt. But it's like, okay, but it's saying the guy is a foreigner. I don't believe that Egyptians didn't have foreigners come into their lands.
The 15% in modern populations is the diluted result of an original admixture event or multiple events over many generations. For this percentage to persist, the original mixing population must have had a significantly higher proportion of Eurasian ancestry.
For anybody who considers themselves an artist, AI is probably one of those things that have made their job dramatically easier. But I hate the fact that nowadays they can actually play with it this much. That Mansa Musa there that they put that is like blonde or whatever, that would have been impossible a few years back. And now there's actually people looking at it like they can actually see it in their eye. I hate that. But we're going to do that too. So let's wait.
So you heard that right. Based on the studies the Grok AI gave him, the Mande people have up to 15% Eurasian DNA. However, based on the Google AI's hypothesis, the Mandan people, going back to the medieval period, may have had 30% or more Eurasian DNA. So that means Sean Beam would be the perfect Mansa Musa, because back then they would have had 30% Eurasian DNA, because it's hypothesizing that.
So to be serious for a while, of course, we can see Mansa Musa being portrayed here in the way that he would have been portrayed, which of course Robert Sapir completely ignores and doesn't even care about. But the question is, and it will always remain, why? Why would you want to change Mansa Musa's race? Which, by the way, comes back to these guys had this obsession of there were no real civilizations within Africa. The only time Africans really care about history is when they look at European history and try to add Africans in. But really what's happening here is, because this is undeniable, it's got attention, it's got international attention. Mansa Musa is really, really popular now around the world. So he has to find a way to attach himself to their civilization, since it's an undeniable thing, which, by the way, any other civilization from Africa, if it gets enough popularity, they will start to try and take responsibility. Remember the Swahili coast, the Persians try to take responsibility for that. Sudan as well. Like, remember I showed you, they tried to take responsibility for that as well. They try to take responsibility for Great Zimbabwe in the past. They can't do it. So a lot of their tricks is to say, I mean, let's first start with this. Remember, even Great Zimbabwe, they wanted to say that, it was like a Jewish outpost or even an Egyptian outpost. And that's where they wanted to get with it. So, which, by the way, these civilizations need more respect, because look how much these people pay attention to it when they mix white there. Like, if the Swahili coast is seen as a Persian outpost, a place where it was made by Persians, I promise you, it will not be ignored the way that a lot of African people ignore it. When people talk about it, they will suddenly be like, yo, look how far we went, look how much we did, and there'll be movies around it, and there'll be all kinds of things.
Hollywood, if you want to make a Mansa Musa film, cast Sean Beam, because according to Seppa, that's the closest person who looks like Mansa Musa. Yeah, blonde haired, blue eyed, brunette, red haired. As long as he's white, that's Mansa Musa. Sorry, I said I wouldn't be laughing too much. I'll try my best. So how are we going to address this? I'm going to look into the genetics, the archaeology, and also historical accounts, and also cultural continuity and development over time linked to archaeology. Okay?
Okay, so let's get into it. Let's see what the DNA says.
So we'll first start with the genetics, okay? The studies Seppa is using to make this hypothesis are actually conflating the Mande DNA. They include other ethnic groups who have higher Eurasian admixture, such as the Fulani. The Fulani on average have around 20% to 35% Eurasian DNA. So when you include them into the study, obviously it's going to skew the genetic evidence. In actual fact, the Mandan people usually have around 0 to 8% Eurasian admixture.
Given how close and the history of the people who are known as the Fulani or the Fulbe, we obviously know that they have been, at least for a while, mixing with people in those regions. And so it's no surprise that they do have some level of DNA influence. I remember there was a time when we actually had no information about this at all. And at least now we know a bit of the information. We know that the cultures, though the people look different, are very similar. And so there is some grounding for this culture that is known and people think is North African, for it being something that is actually, it goes past the Sahara, trans-Saharan, if you can use that word, going all the way down to places like Senegal, because we know as well, and even the people of Senegal, some of them have this cross DNA between these two areas.
Yeah, their paternal DNA is predominantly E1B1A, like other sub-Saharan Africans. Their maternal DNA is also L haplogroups, various L haplogroups from all over sub-Saharan Africa or Black Africa or below the Sahara, whatever you want to say. So that pretty much destroys his hypothesis, because back then, even if it was the case that they were more mixed back then, they wouldn't have looked Eurasian. They wouldn't have looked like Sean Bean. Okay, sorry, they wouldn't have looked.
Okay, so let's talk about it. First of all, he's using studies that are of isolated stuff and ignoring most of the information that 99% of the people in West Africa have only one really DNA thing that is connected to the rest of Black Africa. And then, of course, in North Africa, as I've mentioned before, we have found Black Africans in that region. So I do disagree with the term sub-Saharan Africa, even though I do use it sometimes, because, you know, what word are we going to use? We have to invent a word, but it also has to be accepted before we can just keep using it. I use Black African, but, you know, I don't want to associate the word Black African with the word sub-Saharan African, because that's going to be the same problem. Now, of course, something that he mentions here, although I think he has to address it in a deeper way, is the fact that just because you're mixed with some level of not Eurasian, but North African DNA, the one that you see in parts of the Middle East, just because you're mixed with that, that's not going to make you a blonde person. It's not going to make you, it's not even going to make you close to any of that. In fact, the Fulani are probably a good example of what somebody would have looked like back then if they had this DNA. They don't even have it, but if they did have it, then they would look something closer to that tiny little bit. But even worse than that is Mansa Musa. We don't even have his DNA. So we're talking about one specific person in West Africa who's probably going to have the same DNA as the majority of West Africans, and he's going to look nothing like what this guy is talking about. And so again, what is he basing it on? And you do remember me saying that there is art in the past where people, when you say draw someone, what they do is they first draw the person like how they draw their own people. I've showed some of these before, where when they draw Africans, they draw them like Europeans, and then they just color them black, or sometimes they don't even color them black, in the same way that in Greece, sometimes, well, in some parts of Africa, when they draw Europeans, it's just like a guy who looks like a black guy, because you have a default way of drawing, and sometimes you don't go away from that.
Like northern coastal Berbers, like these type of people. No, look at the people who have the level of admixture Google AI showed him. Okay, these are people like the Fulani and the Tuareg. The Fulani, again, have 20% to 35% Eurasian DNA. The Tuareg have between 30% and 60%, sometimes more Eurasian DNA from the Berbers, because these people are Berber mixed and Berbers. Now look at their phenotypes. Do these look like blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aryans to you? Be honest. Maybe I'm colorblind or something. Tell me, does this Fulani person right here look like a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aryan? Huh?
Now, before we carry on, I actually want to point something out that is very important, which is we must also remember that these terms are Western created, and the Fulani and some of these other groups are considered the same to them, like as the Tamazight and all these other people, that they're not some separate group, and them being black means nothing to the native tribes of North Africa, like literally, their being black means nothing. The only thing that separates these people today is the fact that there's actual borders created by the state. But I've shown you videos of North Africans who used to go up and down from Morocco all the way to Senegal to Nigeria, and they used to go up and down that area. And remember, even in the Mali Kingdom and all of that, they had these words for people who would travel all around because they were a nomadic people, and they go left and right. By the way, they go to Libya all the way back to um, Senegal. They go up and down, left and right, up and down, left and right, and they consider themselves one giant group. One giant group. And so we must separate this debate of race and blah, blah, blah from what the people over there, whether they're pale or not, consider themselves, because they don't consider themselves like black or white or any of that stuff. They consider themselves Tamazight or, free men of the desert, travelers.
Does this Tuareg look like a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aryan to you? The phenotypes SEPA is associating with Eurasian, Aryan, whatever, these are found in northern Africa, the coast of northern Africa, in places like Tunisia, Morocco, and so on. But even in these regions, the people aren't homogeneous. Berbers have various phenotypes based on the regions that they live in. Okay?
Yes, and not only are they not homogenous, but they also have a level of foreignness that came in. So what was once what they were is also diluted even further, and so you do have an increase of groups from both sides, and you have a decrease of groups from both sides, just depending. And remember, a lot of the Arab stuff would have come in and blah 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 blah. So we're talking about a very complicated subject, and obviously Robert Sapir is, which is interesting. It's like, why isn't he converting some of his people in Europe into these people? Obviously, he's one of those people who converts the Greeks into blondes and then converts but why isn't he converting the people in his region into other races? Why is he always converting them into blonde people with blue eyes? Everybody to him is just a blonde person with blue eyes in the waiting. Even black people. It's actually scary. It's like, I think somewhat YouTube is like looking at someone's brain and what they're thinking at all times. And I don't know if that's healthy, because if he actually believes what he's saying, which he probably doesn't, if he does, then he's like strangely, he's got a strangely broken mind.
Now let's look at the Eurasian DNA found in Africa. Is it Aryan? Is it Caucasian? Is it Indo-European? Let's have a look. Now, in Central Africa, you have a people called the Chadics who have R1b-V88 haplogroup. Now, R1b is a haplogroup subclad found in Western Europeans. Yeah, so that's Indo-European. However, in Central Africa, you have that as well. What's going on? Well, these are two different branches of the same haplogroup. There was something called a backward migration which went into Africa. This happened thousands and thousands of years ago, before the development of the Proto-Indo-European population.
So I'm not going to contradict what he says, because of course this is just a mainstream opinion, and of course he's fighting against a alternative point of view. But I have a completely different idea of R1b and how it got in and all that stuff. But we're going to talk about that another day. What I want to talk about is this looking at Indo-Europeans as the ones that basically populated the world. And of course, as he points out, Indo-Europeans really didn't exist by the time that this DNA would have back migrated back into Africa.
Now, the population that went into Central Africa came obviously from Eurasia and settled in Central Africa and developed their own unique subclad of that R1b haplogroup. Now, looking at the people today, do these people look like Aryans to you? These are Central Africans. Some of them are darker than me. Yeah, they've looked like this for centuries. So don't miss me with that nonsense saying, oh, no, they were actually blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aryans in the historical period. No, they weren't. Also, looking at the
which by the way is a point that I try to make about the backwards migration that they talk about in Morocco around 10,000 BC of the DNA. It's like the people over there would have been quite dark, even if the Middle Eastern DNA had come in. Firstly, the Middle Easterners would have been darker themselves. And then, of course, the Indo-European adding that would have changed a lot of things. The skin color wasn't changed by them, but it would have changed a lot of things. It's something that is way later. We're talking about something very, and I think that's where the debate starts to break, because they've tricked us so much to believe that Eurasian, really Middle Eastern DNA is synonymous with being a white person. And of course, the reason why they did this is for obvious reasons. But of course, if you go look at the Middle East, you'll find that there are extremely dark people over there as well. And a lot of them for good reason. And then you'll find that some people who are mixed with Middle Eastern on the other side of India and stuff like that, and Indo-Europeans, they're still dark. And I'm talking about South Indians as well, have some level of Indo-European DNA in them, but they're dark, which means that there's some level of part of their DNA that doesn't just pop up if you have it, and that's if you have it.
And the genetic heritage that they hold. Fun fact, it's not Indo-European either. Now, Berbers hold Natufian-like haplogroup DNA, which predates the Natufian culture. So Natufian-like, Natufian-related DNA. They also hold what's called early European farmer DNA. Now, who were the early European farmers? They were descendants of the Anatolian Neolithic farmer population that migrated into Europe. Yeah. Then later on, the Indo-European Aryan type people came in and mixed with those people, and also, took over. But if you go further south in Europe, more people in the further south hold more of that DNA than people in the north. These people are the ones that mixed with the ancient or prehistoric Berber people.
So obviously this is an important part, and obviously this is one of the reasons why I pay attention to stuff like this, because you cannot look at African history or European history or Asian history and isolate your continent, because if you do, then you have no idea. And remember, North Africans did go into Europe as well, and so there's an extra of that as well. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that is interesting from the past, and if you don't know this, then you're going to have no defense when people start bringing up, oh yeah, Indo-Europeans DNA came in, right? Like, how are you going to address when someone says, actually, we found some Middle Eastern DNA in Egypt, therefore the people of Egypt are 100% like the Indo-Europeans.
Native Africans in that region, Ibo-Mauritian people. So even if you look at the prehistoric genetics, these people were not blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aryans that went into Africa. No, these people were Western Asiatic people. Yeah, we don't even know what language they spoke. It could have been something tied to Semitic, or it could have been something totally unique. Yeah, so North African Berbers, the Eurasian ancestry they hold is Natufian-like, which is predates the Natufians. So they're related to the Natufians, and also they have elements of native indigenous African DNA, which is tied to the E haplogroup, which people like.
Okay, good. At least you mentioned the E haplotype as well, which is a very ancient DNA, even prehistoric DNA that is found in North Africans, and it's actually ubiquitous within North Africans. But they try to separate this DNA out of Africa, even though it's been found in almost all ancient Egyptians. And the way they try to tease that out, the way they try to is like, okay, maybe there's something incorrect about where it came from, but we can see that there's definitely Black African ancestry within North Africa that has been, again, it's been found many times. And again, I'm just assessing this from the mainstream point of view to contradict an alternative point of view, which is far-fetched beyond that one. And of course, a lot of this is created from very small things, and a lot of it comes from modern DNA backtraced. So a lot of people they're not taking into consideration that it's possible that this DNA is something that was formed somewhere else, and then there was a migration at a later date.
Me, West Africans, other sub-Saharan people have. So Berber people have native African DNA and prehistoric Eurasian DNA, which is not even tied to the so-called Aryan populations. Okay. Later on, you do have Europeans that we know mixing with the Berbers. And that's why you get certain people with lighter skin. And also think about the climate. Africa is huge, man. North Africa is huge. It's a complicated region. So this information puts another nail into SEPA's claim that, oh, white people were the ones ruling this region. They invaded, they took over, they were Aryans, they were Caucasian, Indo-European. That's a load of bollocks. Nonsense. Okay?
Okay, so what else is he going to cover? Because I think the DNA part has already been done.
That's easily debunked. If I'm wrong, again, SEPA or your fans, feel free. I'm not going to block you like you block me. Feel free. Talk. Let's talk.
Oh my God, he actually did block him. That's actually hilarious. So he did check and the guy was blocked. Isn't that weird? Like everybody who sort of talks around this guy talks about getting blocked or having their comments deleted or any of that stuff. This guy, how can, I'm going to say it again. The truth fears no question. This is why, by the way, when I could omit, like take out parts of like what this guy is saying and be like, oh, he said Chadic people have Eurasian DNA. Let me delete that from the conversation. No. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. The truth fears no question. The way that we have to deal with that is look at the actual DNA itself and look at all of the other stuff. And if it is true that there was some back migration in the people, then that's what happened. And we're going to have to deal with that. I mean, the Chadic people, as we know, are still black people, even with the Eurasian DNA. I mean, is anybody today, and this is a real question, is anybody today going to go to Chad and really claim that those people are European or Eurasian or Middle Eastern or whatever, even though we know that they're like some of the blackest people on earth, just because they have a little DNA that comes from the Middle East? And even if it was a lot, I mean, just look at them.
All right, let's continue. Now, moving on to archaeology. Now, we don't have exactly Manden human remains going back to the medieval period that we can examine and to confirm the genetic material that's found there. However, looking at certain archaeological sites, for example, like the Dia archaeological sites and the Talem archaeological sites, with the Dia being older, going back into antiquity and before that, and the Talem being medieval, going back to the 11th century and the 16th century, the human remains that have been found all have tropical morphology, which means they have what you call black African characteristics, from the skull to the limb proportions and so on.
So obviously I'm one of these people where I don't really rely on skulls and stuff like that much. I do agree that it gives us some information, but it's not a perfect science. And yes, we can use this information to go and check. And I agree that, this is what happened, but it would have been black Africans, because we know black Africans were the ones dominating the region. Again, genetic wise, they're backtracing from modern people. So there's something broken about that. In the same with Chad, they're backtracing from modern people. And that's why I say I'm not going to contradict that, because there's no point. It's like one of the respected theories about the people of Chad and all of that.
People had agriculture. These people had early urbanization. So SEPA likes to claim that all sub-Saharan cultures were just hunter-gatherers without organization, without social structure, without kings, without governance, anything. They were just docile hunter-gatherers that were taken over.
So actually, I want to read what he says here. Speaking as an anthropologist that earned his degrees without the cheating called affirmative action, damn, I can tell you that sub-Saharan were not pharaohs, had no kings, nor did they ever have a written language, let alone metal or agricultural civilization in Egypt or elsewhere. So that entire statement has been proven incorrect. So he's even if he has degrees, he's a terrible anthropologist. And then if we look at the other one, Aryans disseminated agriculture civilization itself. Hunter-gatherers only thrive in groups of about 30 people. That means everywhere that there was agriculture, civilization, cities, societies, structures with kings or pharaohs, etc., had Aryans at the top of the social order. This guy is insane. This is why, again, just so that this video can be made in a way that has a mainstream side to it. I'm not even going into the whole if they're black or if they just thinking about the Aryan thing alone. It's like the silliest thing ever. And of course, he throws in random pictures of people with oxidized hair, which again, look at Egypt. Look at modern Egyptians. Don't even look at black people. Look at modern Egyptians. Do you really think this hair over there is typical of them? Like red and blonde. Just think of what an Egyptian looks like today. It doesn't even make sense, even if you take the most mainstream ideas.
By Eurasian white people with blonde hair and blue eyes. If that were the case, then why predominantly are the human remains and the archaeological finds showing black people? Also, when it comes to the pottery, for example, going back to the Tichit culture, is different to the pottery that was found in the Berber cultures. Why is that exactly? If, for example, the Berbers are the ones that dominated and created civilization in Western Africa.
So, of course, Robert Sapir and his gaggle of idiots, they would not agree that there was pottery in Africa back then. Like, remember, his whole point is that sub-Saharan Africa was like this area that had nothing but hunter-gatherers until Aryans came. Now, I don't know when he thinks they came, but it's one of the silliest things on the planet.
Can you explain that to me? I mean, what excuse can you make? Oh, they went into sub-Saharan Africa and said, you know what, let's think differently from our northern ancestors, or let's not even incorporate our language in the region. Is that what you're thinking? Is that the fantasy? Like, this fantasy that Seppa has is absolutely ridiculous, bro. That's why I kept on laughing in my other video, because it's crazy. It's absolutely insane, man. Also, when it comes to the evolution of the Sudano-Sahelian architecture, it's all predominantly Western African. It's West African.
Yes, but it's not only that. We also have information, written information from the Arab scholars that talk to us about the lands of Ghana. The city of Ghana consists of 2 towns, blah, 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 and all the way down. Talks about dogs, the metals they used, the stuff they put around their necks. We know this. We know that the Kingdom of Ghana is something that was a black African civilization. And even though some Arabs visited the area, all of them write that this is just another black African civilization. And this goes on in this region until you even get Ibn Battuta, who writes about this. So it's not like it's a one person wrote about it, and it's like tens of people wrote about this area, at least hundreds really, but the ones that end up to us are tens of people. And there's some contributing scholars from these civilizations that we have lost in history, unfortunately. Which, by the way, one of the things that annoys me is the fact of this DNA thing that has been added into the conversation, because when the Arabs went into Chad, when the Arabs went into the Swahili coast, when the Arabs went into West Africa, when they went into Sudan, Ethiopia, all of these places, when they wrote that these people were the Sudan, or when they wrote that these people were the blacks and these people were the whatever, the Zanj and all these other people, other words for black, this DNA stuff didn't matter. Because of course it wasn't, you were black because you were black. But now they're coming back with this DNA, and you look at Madagascar, for example, which some people try to separate from Africa, because they've got Indonesian and black African DNA. Are we supposed to go, okay, so they're not black? Which, by the way, Indonesians are black anyway, but we're gonna go, they're not black actually.
Yeah, I've covered this in another video, one of my second video on this channel. The quality wasn't that good, but go have a look. I've got the evidence. I mentioned, for example, the culture moving to the Mema region, the Tichit Walata culture, the early architecture, the burial mounds, the pottery, all that pointing to indigenous Western African people. For example, the Proto-Mandan people and the Soninke people.
So something he did not mention, because it's a little known fact, a lot of people actually don't know this, but the metalwork that was first discovered by these people completely independently from the rest of the world, and having versions of metals that really would not exist in other parts of the world for hundreds of years. So yeah, that is another thing there. So it's not like a transfer, like you just take things that existed in other parts of Africa and transfer it, or even the Middle Eastern thing. By the way, the dates that people give for Middle Eastern moving in. So let's go back to that Chad thing. The dates that people give for that Middle Eastern moving into blah blah blah. The type of civilization that really was there looked nothing different from any of the other African civilizations. So if this, again, this is guesswork from modern people. If this DNA came in from Eurasians and ended up within Chad, it really didn't do anything because a lot of the technologies that would come later than that DNA, and they really are not seen in Africa until way later, the technologies that they're talking about. And so the DNA would have done nothing in terms of bringing technologies.
These people are the ones that would go on to establish the Wagadu Empire, the first known West African empire, okay, which is also called the Ghana Empire. The name Ghana is a title which comes from that kingdom, that empire. You don't see these titles, you don't see these names, Wagadu, Ghana, in Berber culture. Why do you think that is? Or in any Aryan or Indo-European culture, or whatever you want to say, Middle Eastern, Semitic, whatever you want to claim as white. You don't find that. Why is that?
So you can see him like struggling to put together what white means. This is something that I've talked about before, where they've set it up so that the word white means many things, and the word Caucasian means many things. The word, so that they've set it up so that you can they can pluck any of these terms to mean what they wanted to mean, and then they can attach themselves to certain civilization and then detach themselves when they're like, oh, North Africans, because of some genetic thing, are not that great and blah blah blah, they're not that inventive, they're not that blah blah blah. When they want to like remove themselves from the situation, that's why he's struggling here. Let's hear that repeat again. About think about it. We talk about the word white, like what a white person is. Think about why does it take this long to try and pin it down?
Berber culture. Why do you think that is? Or in any Aryan or Indo-European culture, or whatever you want to say, Middle Eastern, Semitic, whatever you want to claim as white. You don't find that. Why is that?
So here's the truth of the hierarchy of where they put white and non-white. So at the tippity top, depending on who you ask, they start with Anglo-Saxon or they start with Scandinavians as like symbols of what white is. And then it starts to break off there. Then suddenly, you can add Spaniards in there, you can add Greeks in there, you can add Czech, you can add as many people as you want. But what really starts to happen when you do that is they start to have these buttons they can press to sort of eject themselves. And we saw this with, historically, where the word Guinea was used to Italians and stuff like that. And of course, if you look at Greeks and compare, well, Greeks really, yeah. But if you compare Greeks to Persians, and you will hear this from Persians and Greeks, they're like cousins. They consider themselves cousins, which when you then say that means that Greeks are Middle Eastern, right? They go, no, 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 white. Again, they know that they're similar. What they are is similar, but they want to have that button to press, and they go, no, we're part of the European. So really, for the most part, they try to surround Europe and go, this is white. But again, they have to attach themselves, and the Berbers as well will be dragged into this, like the Berbers were white, and all of this. They will drag anybody into it when they do the argument, which means, by the way, it's actually a sad thing because it means we're going to argue forever. Because if they pinned it down, if they said the only people who are white are Anglo-Saxons, then we can go, well, then that's a very small number in the world, and that doesn't include Persians, Greeks, or any of these other people.
Unless you know something that I don't. If you've got any studies, since you're the last real anthropologist left on this planet, why don't you show me where these titles, where these names were used by Indo-Europeans? Show me that the Mande language has been influenced significantly by Indo-European, by Afro-Asiatic Berber languages, or any other white, Aryan, whatever you want to claim language. I'll wait. I'm always here waiting, but I know you're not going to do anything because you're a coward. You're a liar. Lying to your fans and
Bro, not a coward and a liar. That's not a good combination. That's weird. Yeah, right. And I say this again, you know, someone like this, you would expect to be challenged way more than people who are just claiming that, hey, you know what, based on what we can see, Egypt is black. But then, oh, the hoteps and blah, blah, blah. It's like, bruh, you know, there's people online who are literally saying that black people are not even human, at least not human the way that other people are. Why would you think that that's like the big thing to attack? Especially since, like I do, a lot of these people, especially the ones that don't consider themselves necessarily Afrocentric, we just, you know, we'll give up information. Like when you say there's Middle Eastern DNA, and we'll go, okay, yeah, there's Middle Eastern DNA.
lying to people, misusing African history like that. No. I won't let it stand. Now we'll move on to the historical accounts which mention people of the Western Sudanic region, West Africa, and also Mansa Musa himself. Now, the first account goes back to the 12th century. This is from a Damascus-born Egyptian historian and geographer called Al-Umari. Now,
So this is the typical names that that usually people use for these people. And yes, this is perfectly great. As I showed earlier, there's a ton of Arab writers who wrote about West Africa and wrote about North Africa and all these other places. And remember, there are some that are less used because they speak only vaguely about it. But, you know, Al-Masudi is another one who talks about the domains of the Sudan reaching as far as the area of Idris bin Idris.
Al-Umari is said to have met someone who was with Mansa Musa on the Hajj and discussed with him what Mansa Musa looked like. This member of Mansa Musa's entourage described him as a young man of brown complexion. Now, the word brown that was used is asma, which means brown. Now, granted, some people may be like, wait, you're not brown. Mansa Musa is brown, so that means he's not black. So that means he was, instead of being a black man, a Berber, like this phenotype right here, yeah? Well, no, that's bollocks. Other Arab and Berber scholars refer to black West African people as brown of complexion in various.
Okay, so what he's basically trying to say, and of course, we've seen people try to twist this in other ways as well. The word brown here is being used in the literal sense. Just like me and you, when we talk about black people, we go, oh, black people, black people, black people, black people. But if we sat down literally and said, your skin color, right? If we take something that's black, right? If we take a tire, right, and we put it next to your skin color, almost, in fact, I don't know anybody whose skin color is going to be like that. And so obviously when they talk about him in a literal sense, like this is what he actually looked like, they're not going to use the word black. If unless they're grouping him, right? Because the word black, the word Sudan, the word blah blah blah, Ethiopian, the word, all of these, they're used in a grouping sense. And so there's a level of it that's inaccurate for the sake of just the grouping, in the same way that white people are not white and the, you know, whatever. But you know, we if we want to talk literally, then we start going, okay, this is what happens. Like white people, literally, if you were to explain a white person, right, to someone in Africa who had never seen him, you would say that some part of these people is a little translucent, and if you look, you can see their veins very easily. You can hit, if you hit them in a certain spot there, you can actually see blood sort of forming red in the area. Like the pigment will turn a little bit red in that area, and you know, they easily turn under the sun, but not too deep and all of that. Like that's how you literally will describe somebody. And of course, brown would not include anybody Aryan who's blonde.
Periods. For example, the 12th century scholar Al-Idrisi mentions the people of Western Africa being of a brown complexion going towards blackness. What does that mean? So it means like me, I'm dark brown. Yeah, if I get darker, I'm going to be technically black or blue to some people. You know, you get that? The same word asthma was used to describe these people. Unless you're saying white people, white Aryan people are brown instead of black. Is that what Sepa is saying? Is that... If that's the case, then why are you using Sean Bean as the picture of Mansa Musa? That's not the case then, right? But even if that's the case, you can't even reach with this fact, okay? Again,
I actually can't get over the fact that he blocked him. That part is actually kind of hilarious.
I've got another scholar for you. I mean, you know me, I like to go overboard. I like to, overkill. Okay, I'm gonna give you another one. Another 13th century scholar, Ibn Sa'id al-Maghribi, who was a Berber. He mentions the people of Taqur being brown-skinned people in the land of the blacks, meaning the Western Sudan. The land of Taqur was in the Senegambian region. Yeah, again, he's referring to a black population in Western Africa, which is known as the land of the blacks, Al Sudan. The next scholar we're going to discuss.
So again, you guys are going to recognize this word takrur that I've used many times, and even al-Maghribi. I talked about him like a couple of days ago, which is interesting. And yes, he describes that region as having black Africans, and this is where it gets in, where you start talking about the Sanhadra and Sanega people and all these other people who lived in that area as well. So there's so much to talk about this that it's actually kind of tiring and interesting.
Is none other than Ibn Battuta, who went into the Mali Empire after Mansa Musa passed away. Now, he mentioned the women of the Mali Empire being dark brown skinned. Yeah, using that same word, asma, dark brown skinned women that were beautiful. Now, he didn't say these were white people ruling black people and some of them mixing with them. No. He said they were dark brown women. Okay? And also some of the customs he saw, he found very strange. Like, for example, I believe it was a princess in the palace who had her torso bare. He was like, what's going on? This is very strange. This is what is this? Well, in many black African cultures, having your torso bare in the heat of sub-Saharan Africa is normal. In the Sahel, it was normal. Obviously, they covered up because many of them were Muslim, but that was normal.
So Ibn Battuta is one of the first people who tells us a couple interesting things. I would put it out, but let's not read it. We can summarize it easily. So he tells us that obviously there are the brown-skinned women of West Africa, that is, he mentions, but he also refers to them as black in many of the other parts. So he uses these words interchangeably. And then he actually says there's one group of women that the black people were traveling with. So the black men had a group of women from North Africa that they were traveling with, which had pale white skin, and they were extremely fat in the tradition of the Mauritanians. So this is something that they were looking for. So these are women that were taken from North Africa, possibly Arabs, taken from North Africa, and they were sent through the Sahara. They traveled through the Sahara, and because they're bending to the traditions of the Mauritanians, they're fattened up in order to be beautiful by the standards of that area. So there is at least one account of pale-skinned people living there, but they're just like a harem, because of course Islam allowed harems and they allowed foreigners to be harems, so they did that, which is possibly where a lot of this DNA that is Middle Eastern comes from, where a lot of people, they just look at it like it was some dominating race that took them down or whatever. But a lot of it can come from that. And secondly, let's review what he said about the woman being bare-breasted, and he said that's like a traditional African thing. So in Ibn Battuta's books, a lot of the people who are bare-chested were Muslim. As I said, the Muslim culture has been applied in very different ways in very different parts, which is why today when people talk about the one Islam and the Muslim faith was the woman who had her bare chest out. Ibn Battuta asked the question to the guy, if you guys are Muslim, why do you guys allow that? And he was like, well, our women are not like your women. They're not scandalous like your woman. Which means, by the way, that black African was aware of what their type of women were like. And this has to do with the fact that back then they used to travel back and forth all the time. Another thing that they said was, because where Ibn Battuta came from, women could not mix with men. But over there, women who were married were literally just sitting and walking around with their bare chest out and chilling with other men that they're not married to. And they asked him, Ibn Battuta asked them, how can you do those? Like, they're friends. What are you talking about? they can just hang around with each other. They're friends. And this really was the history of Africa. And of course, Ibn Battuta stormed off, going, "Oh, this place has got nothing good about it." Well, first he said all the good things about the stuff that is good, but then he looked at that part and was like, "Oh, these people are not good," meaning morally, because it doesn't match the morals that he was setting. And then, of course, he went to places like Somalia or the empire over there, and they were more in line with the Muslim faith, and the women were covered up and all this other stuff. And he was very happy about that. And then he saw the Zanj, and he was very angry about that. And he talked about how some of the Swahili people, they target the Zanj all over the place, taking some of these wild women, well, they call them wild, but some of these wild women, and filling up their uh harems as well. Now, not too many, because of course the Swahili coast has never had that big of a population.
It's part of the culture. And it also shows that, oh, you're saying these are Berber people. No, these weren't Berber people, because he was noticing some strange different cultural elements which were different to the cultures he was used to, because Ibn Battuta was a Berber. Now, on his travel,
Okay, so I want to correct a few things. So, Ibn Battuta definitely was a Moroccan or a North African. It's not known what his race was, or if he was a Berber in the racial version. And as we pointed out, Berber is a much more expansive word than a certain thing. But Ibn Battuta lived in a time when Islam was dominating Morocco. But we know from pictures, and even in when the time the Europeans came, we know from pictures and stuff that there are women from North Africa who walked around with bare chested as well. I just want to point that out as well, that the idea that people had their bare chest out is not just something that is stuck in the southern regions. We have images going back that show that women did do this in North Africa as well, even in the Islamic times. Here is actually an image from Nicolas de Nicolay, a person who wrote about North Africa, Turkey, the Moors, all these type of people, and he gave us images to go along with them.
Ibn Battuta meets a governor within Mali who was a black man called Faba Maga. This man is said to have accompanied Mansa Musa on his pilgrimage to Mecca, the famous travel of Mansa Musa. This man mentions someone called Abu Abbas al-Dakali, who accompanied Mansa Musa. In his writings, Ibn Battuta calls this man a white man because he was from Morocco, a tribe called the Al-Dakali, a Moroccan Berber tribe. So, why is he making distinctions saying, oh, this man is white? Why do you think Ibn Battuta felt the need to make that distinction and call this man white? Why do you think that is? Because obviously the Mali Empire was not white. It was not ruled by white people. It was not ruled by Berber people who are white passing. Okay? Like I said, the so-called Berbers who look white are found in the coastal regions. Yeah? Deep in certain regions of northern Africa, they're olive skinned, they're darker skinned. This is the phenotype that they hold. So even when he says white, he doesn't mean white as in, oh, this man is European passing. No, he means like someone who's olive skinned, as opposed to the dark brown, darker copper brown skin that me and other black people further south have.
So, of course, Ibn Battuta is a bit of a later period type of person, but of course, we could look into other Arab writers who write about the Black Africans found in North Africa. But, that's a question for another day. Right now, we're debugging Robert Saper.
Okay? So again, if Mansa Musa was white, why is he making distinctions and calling someone else white who accompanied Mansa Musa on his travel? Shouldn't you just say, oh, Mansa Musa was as white as this guy? Explain to me. Now, the last account I'll leave you with goes back to the period before even the rise of the Mali Empire. This goes back to the Almoravid Empire, which was a Berber empire that went into the Iberian Peninsula. This account is by Yakut al-Hamwai. He mentions in his writing a king of a southern kingdom called Zafun visiting the city of Marrakesh, where the Almoravids had their headquarters. Now, he meets the leader of the Almoravids, this king. In his writing, he mentions that the king of Zafun was stronger and more versed in kingship than the king of the Almoravids. What happened is this king met the king of Almoravids in Marrakesh. The king of the Almoravids was on foot, and this man remained on his horse. Then the king of the Almoravids, or what he called the commander of the Muslims, went in while this guy followed on horseback, showing he was more powerful. Now, what does this scholar say about the king of Zafun? He mentions that he was a tall man of black complexion with his face veiled, his eyes were bloodshot, and his palms were yellow. Tell me, does that sound like a blue-eyed, Aryan, Caucasian, red-haired, blonde-haired, whatever to you?
So of course he's really going through them right now, all of the list. And of course the Almoravid, as much as it's considered a Berber thing, the Almoravid was a joint North African Sahelian thing that happened at the time. So a lot of these things are complicated, and the reason why we get them mixed up is because we're using modern terms. And I do agree with some of the people who say at some point you have to use their terms because it will less confuse what we're talking about.
Well, how are you going to explain this? Oh, the man painted himself black. Is that what you're going to say? He painted himself black in order to fit in, or he was actually a white blonde-haired dude. That's why he was veiled to fool the people that he's actually ruling, that he's black. Why would he need to fool the people if, in your case, sub-Saharan people were useless? They weren't organized enough to do anything against anyone who would come to dominate them and create empires in their lands while they just sit down doing nothing. Okay? Again, someone explain it to me. Why would he describe this man as a black man on horseback? Huh? By the way, the kingdom of Zafun has been identified with the kingdom of Daira. The kingdom of Daira was once a vassal of the Wagadu Empire, but they broke off as the Wagadu Empire began to go on a decline. The kingdom was Soninke. The Soninke are related to the Mande people. So this goes to show you, even before the Mali Empire, before Mansa Musa, these people in the region, dominating the region, were all black. Yeah, even going back to the Wagadu Empire.
So I know there are some of you are probably thinking about it right now, and you're probably thinking this is kind of ridiculous. Yes, it is kind of ridiculous that we're trying to convince somebody that a guy who was obviously black, who came from West Africa, is a black guy. At least when it comes to North Africa, and at least when it comes to the Middle East and all those places, when you try to convince certain things, at least there's a level of could be without being completely crazy. But when you're talking about proper West Africa, that's when you're just like, it just hit me like, oh my God, what are we doing?
Empire, the titles of the Wagadu Empire, how they're described, their snake cults, all that is common in the region. All that is showing these people were black people. Yeah. Otherwise, tell me, why are they speaking Manden languages instead of Berber languages? Usually, the culture that dominates a given region ends up implementing its own norms, its own social standings, right? For example, language, and also genetically, they influence the region. I've already showed you that's not the case. Manden people have 0 to 8% Eurasian DNA predominantly. Looking at all areas of their DNA, their paternal, autonomal, maternal, all of it, predominantly they are black sub-Saharan people. So miss me with that nonsense of a white Mansa Musa, blah, blah, blah. Why would why would a Berber king name an entire empire the Great Assembly of the Manden? That's what the Mali Empire is called, by the way, if you translate into English. Yeah.
So this video is nearly done, and we are in here. I think I'm going to have to separate the two videos that I was going to put together since this one is so long, but we can see what we'll do.
That's the word for Mali Empire. Why would they use that title? I asked this in my other video. Okay, so I'm probably repeating myself. So tell me, with all this overwhelming evidence, how exactly was the Mali Empire and all black West African, Central African, or every empire on the continent, how was it white when genetics, archaeology, even written accounts debunk what you're saying? Explain that to me. Now, in that video, he pretty much rehashes other stuff that he spoke about.
Oh yeah, something else just hit me again, which is, why do they put a limit to how much they're going to lie? By the way, like if you're going to say stuff like Mansa Musa was white, blah, blah, blah was white, why not just go, the whole world was white? Like, why is he limiting it to this thing? It's not like he has anybody who's going to debate him because he's, obviously coward and he's blocking people.
Which I debunked. So I don't need to really go into that much detail. For example, the image of Mansa Musa he uses, this one, and this one being the actual one, which he re-edited, and also my explanation of why they depicted Mansa Musa like that. That's in my first debunking video, so I'm not going to.
So as you can see, he used an image of a prior time, and of course, the map that is used at the time had a lot of incorrect information. But he doesn't use any of that other information, by the way, that would go completely against the thing in an incorrect, and then it was corrected, and Mansa Musa was put back to who he actually was and what he actually looked like. But you can see even in that image, as he said, AI generated his lips out because obviously the lips made him look like a black guy. And obviously, there's something to be said about an artist not seeing the person and just going off of drawing and thinking. And in the original one as well, people who are like Indian and so many other places, they're not given their proper racial thing. Like I mentioned again, remember the ancient Egyptians, when they sort of were drawing foreigners, a lot of the time they would start with their own way of drawing themselves, and then they draw a foreigner, and the foreigner would almost look exactly like them. But in real life, once they sat down and they were like, okay, this is what the foreigners look like, they look nothing like them.
Go into that. The last thing I'll discuss though is Kush. He mentions a mummy, a princess called Takabuti, and saying, "Oh, look at her red hair and the genetic studies that were done on her. See, this shows that the Kushites were white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aryans."
Okay, so this is what I was talking about earlier in another video where I said no, Kushites are black or white depending on whether they want to portray them as slaves or not. So when he wanted to portray them as slaves, suddenly they're black people again. And then now he's like, see, the Kushites were actually blonde Aryans. This is what he does. This is what a lot of them do, actually. Like I said, they will do this game where they end up being Middle Eastern or Aryan or whatever.
At first, in his old videos, he mentioned Phoenicians. I debunked that. Then I realized he didn't mention Phoenicians in this video. All he said is they were white. That's still debunked, okay? The lady that he's showing as a Princess Takabuti, she's not really a Kushite princess. She's just someone who lived in the 25th dynasty, during the 25th dynasty, I mean. This was in Upper Egypt, yeah? She was a noble lady, and I believe this the daughter of a priest of Amun, yeah? They found a haplogroup DNA in her maternal ancestry, so from her mother's line. This haplogroup is found in the Near East, Northern Africa, and also Europe. So because of that, he's saying, there you go. She was white and blonde-haired, blue-eyed. But if you look at it, if you look at it deeply, that's not the case.
By the way, I know what you guys are probably thinking. What's up with the blonde hair and blue eyes? Like, what's up with that? Why does he keep obsessing over that? And the answer is actually a very simple one, because of course every European is not blonde with blue eyes today. So obviously that's not necessary to be a white person. And so what is it about it? It's because it's one of those things that, so because they associate blonde hair and blue eyes with being a white person in a way that it cannot be vague. So or it cannot be not vague. What word I'm looking for? It cannot be. It has to be there. There we go. That's a white person, a person with blonde hair and blue eyes. That's why they obsess over that look being found in other places, because again, it's a purity test, and they're trying to find and go, there it is. There's the proper, and they're doing that again because, as I mentioned, they have degrees of what a white person is.
Oh no, when it comes to Egypt, Egypt was the crossroads of various civilizations and cultures. There was a lot of admixture and so on in Egypt, going back to even the prehistoric times, with the Natufians, native North Africans, even Nilotic people to an extent, and also some European people. So finding that haplogroup in a mummy in Upper Egypt is not really a surprise. I'm not surprised. More like, oh my God, oh, that means Kush was white. No, it doesn't mean Kush was white. And this person has nothing to do with the royal family of the Kushites. He was an Egyptian, an Upper Egyptian. Yeah.
So of course, there's something very strange that he's saying over here. Of course, Egypt has been seen as a crossroad, but again, the word crossroads I dismiss, because most places in the world were crossroads for people. There's no like, oh, it was this one crossroads. Like, so was the Middle East, so was Greece, so was all these other places. This is obviously the mainstream point of view, except the European part of it, which obviously by the 25th dynasty, Europeans had come to Egypt. Like we know that Taharka and all of these people do mention having contact with Europeans. So, well, another example of this is uh, that group, the Colchians and stuff like that. So we know that Europeans had been part of this play. The biggest people who are part of the play in the prehistoric times are Middle Eastern people. Now, there definitely was trade between the Mediterranean and Egypt, but most of it had nothing to do with DNA and crossing over people and stuff like that.
The Kushites have level of Eurasian ancestry? Likely so. You know, humans mix. Okay, we all mix. We all mix in certain way. Even me, I've got Khoisan ancestry. I believe I have Southern Cushitic ancestry to an extent.
So obviously, I strongly disagree with what he's saying, and I know for a fact that Cushitic DNA, because they've done tests, right? And it was during the Christian period where we see a change in the DNA of people. So most of the people in Sudan in the north came back with like Dinka-like DNA, and I can actually show the study. And then a Middle Eastern addition came in at a certain time. Now, something that I can appreciate about this, and I've talked about this angle of understanding within Africa, because I think this guy's from Africa, this angle of understanding within Africa, which is they don't bow down to DNA, right? In Africa, we don't bow down to DNA. You're not black or not black because of your DNA. You're black or not black because you look like a black person, and you look like, basically you look like a black person. Like he looks like a black person, so he's probably a black guy, even if he has like 5% Eurasian or whatever. And I've tried to talk about this, which is there's like this Western thing, like, oh, we found Eurasian DNA in Egypt. And it's like, okay, what does that mean today? Like, are you saying that the guy would have looked like, some Hollywood actor who's a white guy, or would he just have looked like a black guy with Eurasian DNA? This is a conversation people have been going through for a long time. Again, if you want, you could go look at the people of Yemen and go see what can happen when you have low levels of Eurasian DNA, lower than Africans, but you have some African DNA. In fact, let me just throw in some of these images. So you can see their hair, of course, is the big giveaway that they are somewhat mixed with the Yemenite people. And you can see, now, let me ask you a question. Do you think anybody in Yemen does not consider these people black because of their Eurasian DNA? And I'll, in fact, give you one up there and say, or another question, and I'll say, do you not consider these people black because they have some Eurasian DNA? Let's not play that trick. And of course, like I said, I'm from Africa, so I'm very familiar with this opinion where a lot of Africans, most Africans, they say Egypt, probably a mix of several different people, including Nilotic, other Africans, probably Chadic, and Middle Eastern people. The Europe one is not really a very typical idea that those people were there in that area. And then, of course, North Africa has the same mixing in the frame of the eyes or of Africans. And of course, there's this whole conversation about, should we consider North Africans part of Africa and blah, blah, blah. Most Africans do. They consider North Africans part of Africa. And there's a big problem that's happening right now. And I actually have to talk about it in a video where there's a great replacement theory where, and it's really being shoved in there by the Western world, where some of the North Africans are saying, because there's a lot of Somalians and stuff trying to move into North Africa to get to Europe, they're saying that they should deport the black Africans because they're trying to change the race of the North Africans. This is the great replacement theory. Again, we know that it's mainly to do with the Western world. The Middle East, really, you don't see any talk of that. And they leave some Africans in the desert. Like they literally just deport them to the desert and leave them there, and some of them perish.
So it means I have a drop or something of Eurasian ancestry. Doesn't mean, oh, my ancestor was white. No, it doesn't mean, doesn't mean that. Okay? People need to think more critically. I'm like, how are you an anthropologist and you can't even think critically and do the due diligence to research all this stuff properly and make sure what you're showing is correct? This dude is disingenuous. I'm questioning the university that gave him that degree. He says he's a qualified anthropologist, and now he's claiming he's the only anthropologist left because he's a snowtep, because he wants to claim every culture on this planet as Caucasian and Aryan. Yeah? I don't have.
I mean, I hate to be the guy who says it, but actually, the real incentive to do this comes from the books you can write, the YouTube videos you can produce, the different media circles that will give you attention if you come up with very crazy ideas. And that is why people end up in those sections. They get paid a lot of money to do that. That is why there's a lot of people who are anti-Islamic, pro this, blah, blah, blah. And they say all kinds of crazy things that will that would never be said in another time. They would never say it if they were another time. There's a woman specifically from Iran, which I am thinking about when I talk about this.
These qualifications, okay? But I love to research. I love to fact check. I have critical thinking. So that's how I'm able to debunk you, okay? I don't know if Seppa will see this or if his fans will see this. If a fan is watching this, you've seen all what I've said. The sources are down there in the description. Look it up. Correct me if I'm wrong. If I've said something wrong, if I've misled you, feel free, debunk me. Show me how disingenuous I am and show me I'm wrong. Yeah, if you want to make your own video, feel free. If you want to comment, feel free. I'm not going to block you on.
He's not going to block you the way Robert Sapir blocks you and doesn't allow the information to go through.
X or on YouTube. Feel free. Unlike Seppa, who's a coward, blocks people who debunk him, I'm not going to do that. Feel free to debunk me and address me, okay? Anyway, if you've got this far, you must enjoy my content, okay? You must enjoy the debunking, all right? So Lord Snowtep, he's going to remain quiet. He's probably going to make another video next year. Oh, Mansa Musa was white because he's found something else that's bollocks on AI, okay? You got to be careful with AI, right? Fact check AI, right? And also be critical of what AI gives you. If you just eat up what it tells you, yeah, you end up looking like a fool like this.
So, of course, AI dreams up information. In other words, AI can hallucinate. And sometimes AI, you can force it to come out with an answer. I've literally done it before. I've been on ChatGPT and I sit there and I'm like, you know, try to tell me that the Japanese people are black, and it will first go, no, I can't, no, that doesn't work, this doesn't work, and then I put in a few extra stuff and then it'll come back like, yes, I've got proof that they're black and I can show you links and you sit there like, wow, it's just making stuff up. By the way, if you try to go to the links, they go to like a hollow page. It's kind of hilarious.
Yeah. And this guy is a qualified anthropologist. I have to keep repeating that. Qualified anthropologist. How can you not do I'm sorry. How can you not do that? Me, an independent researcher who doesn't even have qualifications in these fields, is debunking you. Are you not ashamed? Oh, yeah. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the video.
Okay, so we're going to have to make a separate video. Feel free to subscribe to this guy if you want to. He talks about African history as well. Obviously, less from the side that I talk from, and he's more into the mainstream stuff. But he does big up African history, which is what I like. So thank you for watching, and hopefully nobody gets super triggered about me leaving out the Eurasian DNA and stuff like that. That's just me trying to focus on the topic. Thank you very much for watching.